This is Nina, your project management instructor and coach. In today's topic, we're going to discuss two concepts: organizational process assets, OPAs, and enterprise environmental factors, EEFs. Let's get started. OPAs, organizational process assets. Just by the word asset, we know it's something positive. Organizational process asset is not an asset like real estate asset, like a building. It's an asset that comes as a result of organizational processes taking place. So as the company does its work, runs its business, does whatever its daily operations and project work, all of these different things the company does, it results in an asset. Well, not always. It can result in an asset if a company is focused on capturing those assets. So we all end up with knowledge base just by doing day-to-day work, project work, different things. It is how well the company is doing at capturing those assets so that they can then be used for the benefit of all the projects and operations in that company. So let's understand some of the examples or types of organizational process assets so that we can really have an in-depth understanding of why OPA matters. We have templates. So last class I asked you guys if I told you I want to have a project charter and I give you a blank page or I give you a template and I tell you which one do you want, you said you guys would pick a template. Absolutely. And the reason why we said templates are an important asset is because, first of all, we don't have to reinvent the wheel. The documents of the same type have consistently same type of information in it, in same space, in same location, so it's easier to cross-reference such documents. And also, it makes sure that all the content that needs to be in there is there. I gave you guys a fun example last class about, going to a doctor's office, you're just getting established with a provider, and they give you that clipboard with the medical history form, right? Well, imagine how you would feel if they just gave you a blank piece of paper and told you, write your family history here. It'd be a little bit more difficult, right? So, in other words, templates are there to guide us onto what content is necessary, and they do it in a specific order, and it makes it possible for us to track information, to cross-reference information, and to make sure that every document of that sort has all the appropriate content in it. So this is a really, really important organizational process asset. Even though it's an asset, doesn't mean that it's perfect. So templates do get revised over time, and when they don't, sometimes they lose their value because processes might have changed and the information we're collecting might not meet the same requirements of the new processes. So as important as it is to create templates, it's also important to keep them up to date to make sure that they're relevant and that they contain the information that needs to be collected and that we can actually store them in such a way to where they're useful for us in all the things that we do. Now, the next concept or next example of an organizational process asset are lessons learned. So lessons learned are a little bit different than templates in that they are the collection of knowledge, things that went well, things that didn't go so well, insights into what you've learned from running a project. All of these different things are important because the mistakes that we make now do not have to be repeated in the next project. And while some people are hesitant to put down things that didn't go so well in lessons learned, it's a huge mistake because collecting lessons learned and documenting them in the lessons learned register is not about putting blame on who did what wrong. It's about making sure that we understand that certain way or certain approach to doing something didn't work. Instead, something else worked. So the companies that have built the culture in which it's okay to reflect on it. They encourage for us to reflect on what went well, what didn't go so well, what we could do better next time, are more likely to be able to successfully collect lessons learned and have a repository of lessons learned that's available for different staff members and project managers to look at. Because if I can find a related project to the project that I'm about to do now, I would like to look at what they've learned from that process, what didn't work for them, what worked for them, because then I'm less likely to make the same mistake that they made, because I now actually see somebody else's experience with something similar in nature. So lessons learned are very important as well. The next example of an organizational process asset are organizational policies, standard operating procedures, and guidelines that we have in organizations. And why are they considered organizational process assets? Because we need to be able to know what is a specific step-by-step process for doing certain things in our project. What is the process for retrieving files? What is the process for obtaining approvals for grants? What is the process? In other words, we like to have a standard operating procedures because it reduces the chance of us making a mistake, chance of us not being non-compliant with the company's policy, and it also makes it easier because we don't have to ask one person who doesn't know about it, ask another person about it, ask another, spend all this time trying to figure out what the right course of action is. If we have an easily mapped out standard operating procedure or process or policy about something, then we can follow that policy's guidance and say, okay, well, I'm following this policy, this is how I'm supposed to get it done. And easier it is to have access to that policy, better is less time we're spending trying to figure out what the right way to go about doing things is. So that's the other example for the organizational process assets. Enterprise environmental factors can be positive or negative, henceforth the word factor. Factor can be either positive or negative. And while people might get confused and think of environmental as in weather or climate, it's not that type of environment. That's why it's called enterprise environment. I often tell my students, and I told you guys last class, put that little hyphen in between enterprise and environment, because if you think of them as one concept, you'll think of it as an enterprise environment. Okay, what does that mean? That means it's an environment, a business environment within which you are operating, and it has certain factors that can impact your project, and that impact could be either positive or negative. We refer to enterprise environmental factors in short as EEF, and EEF, enterprise environmental factors, are an input into all project management processes, and they're very, very important. So what are some of the examples of enterprise environmental factors? We have organizational culture. So the culture within which the project is taking place. Culture at DMV versus Google versus Amazon versus different agencies differ greatly. And a positive organizational culture in which employees are motivated, everybody's going above and beyond, is a much better type of organizational culture to work with than an organizational culture in which you are not able to get people's buy-in to go above and beyond, to do their job, to go beyond the bare minimum. So the organizational culture and that set of norms and beliefs that is predominant in a company really matters. And while all enterprise environmental factors are outside of the realm of control of the project manager and of the project team, it is important for project managers and the entire team to be aware of those enterprise environmental factors, because of being oblivious to them can cause issues, and I'll give you some examples of how that can happen as well. So other than organizational culture, as an example of an enterprise environmental factor, we also have organizational structure. So how the organization is structured will affect whether you're able to run projects effectively, how easy or how difficult things are, how complex the communication is, and stuff like that. So we have our functional organizations in which the work is organized by departments or functions. So we'll have billing and the billing manager and all the billing staff underneath the billing manager. We'll have sales and the sales manager, that's the functional manager, and then all the sales representatives working under the sales manager. Now, in a functional organization, it is difficult for those who work in that structure to have too much exposure and collaborative work outside of the realm of their specific function. So for those people that want to experience different things, learn new things, and collaborate in a creative and innovative way, it's not as easy to do so in a functional organizational structure. We then have projectized structure, and that organizational structure pretty much is organized around the projects that the company has. So you have the project team members who serve their function for the purpose of each project, and then you have your project manager. And of course, executive leadership of some support staff, but that's about it. The issue with the projectized organizations that we want you to be aware of is that frequently there is not much loyalty to such organizations, especially if they're unable to continuously provide work for the project team members. What does that mean? That means that if you have a company that has projects and then they can't get another contract to do another project, they're going to have to let go of their staff. Now, if they're able to keep on getting projects, they can keep those staff members employed. When any worker works in an environment where there's a lot of uncertainty as to whether you're going to have work after this project is over, it's hard to build the feeling of loyalty among staff because they don't feel that they have a secure job. So when job security is threatened, along with that comes a shaken sense of loyalty to that company, because while somebody might be working on their project, they're at the same time looking for another job because they want to make sure that they can still feed their family. So that's one potential difficulty of being in projectized organization if such organization does not have sufficient amount of work. And think of it this way too. They might have some great talent that comes along and works on some of their projects, and then if they don't have more projects coming along, they end up having to lose that talent, and that talent goes somewhere else. And the very process of losing very good talent within your human realm of resources can be very painful for a company. And then we have matrix organization. And matrix organization is a combination of both functional and projectized organization. They are weak and they're strong matrix organizations. If you think of it this way, they say communication within the matrix organization is kind of complex. And where does that belief and that fact actually come from? It comes from the fact that when you are working in a matrix organization, you have two bosses. What does that mean? That means that while you still work within a function, within a department, and you have your functional manager that you report to, so if you're in billing and that's your forte, and you have your billing manager, that's still the person you report to. However, part of your time is allocated for assisting various projects. So now you also have to report for those duties to a project manager. So if the relationship between the functional manager and project manager is strained, there might be some difficulties, and it might make communication a little bit more difficult and more complex. Now, the positive thing about the matrix organization is that people get exposure to various things, to collaborative efforts, to working in different settings, and whereas in functional departmental functional organization, the work seems repetitive and boring and same thing every single day. Those who in matrix organizations, those who want to explore and go get outside of their repetitive environment and do fun project work in collaborative setting, then they're able to experience that as well. And for those employees that like stuff like that, it's really helpful because then they are able to it builds loyalty for them to stay within that organization because they're motivated, because they're constantly learning, because they feel like they're growing, their knowledge base is growing as well. So there are pluses and minuses about different organizational structures, but the main point that you guys have to understand is that even though the organizational structure is outside of your control as a project manager or anybody within your team, it's outside of anybody's control itself, it is important for us to realize what kind of organizational structure we're working with, right? Because then you understand what the dynamics are, what some of the expectations are, what some of the factors will be in terms of what we might have to deal. We might have to deal, if we're in a projectized organization, maybe we don't have a lot of loyalty because people have job uncertainty. If we are in a matrix organization and there's conflict between the functional manager and project manager, we can expect that the people themselves, the employees, will feel uncomfortable because of the known arguments and things of that sort. But we also know that if the functional managers and project managers are working well together and can effectively allocate time towards project and towards functional work, then we know that the employees themselves can actually get a lot of benefits from it, growth and things of that sort, and definitely build loyalty and build that collaborative approach to being beneficial to their company. So that's organizational structure. In addition to organizational culture and organizational structure, we also have laws and regulations as one of the examples of the enterprise environmental factors. Laws and regulations are definitely outside of our direct control. However, being unaware of those laws and regulations and pushing them to the side and not paying attention to the laws and regulations that are relevant to your project can be very painful in terms of fines, project having to shut down, and violations, and pretty much overall, not just financial, but also time delays to clear those violations to get the project work started all over again. So it's important to be aware of the basic laws and regulations, whether it's OSHA safety regulations, whether it is different environmental regulations, Department of Building, Department of Transportation, whatever the different regulations that might apply to your project are, we need to be aware of them. I also told you last class the importance of expert judgment. And expert judgment is critical to us not making mistakes in the areas in which we don't have the expertise. You're not required to be an attorney if you're a project manager. You're not required to be a scientist or anything of that sort, right? So what do we do then? If we are uncertain of certain legal ramifications or legal regulations that we have to follow, we should not hesitate to seek expert judgment from a person that has legal background, from an attorney of the company or the attorney on retainer or things of that sort. Why? Because we want to make sure that we are fully aware of our laws and regulations that are applicable to our project and make sure that we're not putting in jeopardy the project itself and its outcomes by not being aware of this specific enterprise environmental factor. So we have organizational culture, organizational structure, laws and regulations. And then we have PMIS, Project Management Information System. So the project management information system is very important in the following sense. It can be positive or negative, just like all EEFs can be. And what does it consist of? It consists of different software that companies using, different structure in which the information system is organized in a company. So does your company have the most up-to-date scheduling software? Does your company have a really good timekeeping software? Does your company have an effective way to collect lessons learned and to share them? How is the document sharing information system built? Is it searchable? Is it user-friendly? If I want to look for a document, how easy or how hard it is to find that organizational document in the information system of that company. So the project management information system really matters because those are all the different tools like software, hardware, different things that we need to help us run the project better. So it's an enterprise environmental factor because the company might or might not have it. And we need to know how good or how bad. We need to understand the positive and negative elements of the existing PMIS so that we can find the best way to run our project within those constraints. So that's a very important thing to remember. So enterprise environmental factors outside of our control, they can be positive or negative, and they have several examples and types or categories of enterprise environmental factors, including organizational culture, organizational structure, laws and regulations, and our PMIS, Project Management Information System.